Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Dr. Michaela Musilova. Michaela is an astrobiologist, speaker, analog astronaut, and author. She has been conducting space-related research at institutions around the world, including CalTech, University College London, University of Bristol, Chiba University, and others. Additionally, she has been working with NASA, European Space Agency, and international observatories, such as the University of London and Canada, France, Hawaii telescopes. Michaela was the director of High Seas and commander of over 30 simulated missions to the Moon and Mars in collaboration with NASA, ESA, and many other international organizations. She is currently a visiting professor at the Slovak University of Technology, global faculty at the International Space University, and head of research of the space technology company NEEDRONIX. Furthermore, Michaela has received numerous prizes and grants, including the Emerging Space Leaders Grant, Women in Aerospace Europe Young Professional Award, and she was selected as one of the most promising 30 under 30 by Forbes Slovakia. Michaela's new project, Seven Summits, is focused on performing research, educational, and outreach activities with partners around the world. She regularly teaches, gives lectures, and keynote presentations to a range of wide individuals across the world and works with international media. Moreover, she writes articles for Space.com and co-authored her biography, A Woman from Mars. I am incredibly excited to dive into her journey and see what ignited and sparked her passion for space. So welcome, Michaela. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction and kind words. I'm really happy to be here today.
Thank you. Yeah, and I have to start off with the question I've mentioned in your bio and your introduction. You have so many things that you are involved in and like to be a part of. I'm sure your days are hectic and fully packed. So I'm going to start off with the question of what does your typical day look like? I'm sure there usually isn't one, but how does it usually run?
Yeah, I guess that's the answer to your question. I don't really have a typical day. And it's because I'm kind of manager of my own work and have been for a long time. Even when I was the director of High Seas, there would be days where I would be the commander of a mission. I would be in a simulation. So the commander of a lunar or Martian crew, living on the side of a volcano in Hawaii, pretending to be on the moon or Mars. Sometimes I would be the flight director, so I'd be in mission control running that mission. But then all the other hats I wear also take me around the world. So actually over the last couple of months, I was in Dubai and Romania and Paris and London. I also climbed Kilimanjaro as part of my new Seven Summits project. So yeah, I don't really have a typical day, but it always comes down to just really good time management. I love doing all these different things, and I love combining my research and technology passion with my outreach activities. So it's always very important for me to dedicate enough time for that. And then it's all about kind of also working that around my travels and other things. So basically, yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the only thing I can really say my days have in common is that I just plan them sometimes to 5-minute intervals to make sure I fit everything in. I do work a lot and most of the time, but it's also so important to have time for yourself. So I'm trying to do better at dedicating enough time for my hobbies, time with friends and loved ones, and just time for myself to do sports, for example, which I really enjoy. And just as long as you can plan all that into the schedule, you can have a really busy life. But it's just really important to plan things well.
Definitely. I'm also a planned person, so I like making sure I know my schedule. And so I think it's amazing that you're able to balance both your professional endeavors, the things that you were part of have been incredible experiences, which we'll dive into, but also taking care of yourself and making sure you're making time for what really matters at the end of the day. So really, that's amazing. And you mentioned Seven Summits, and I'm curious to learn more about it. So what is the project Seven Summits, and what does it entail?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for asking. It's my new big project, and it's a research, educational, and outreach project. And during this project, I'm planning on climbing the Seven Summits, which basically the tallest mountain on each continent. And I started with Kilimanjaro, and I'm planning on working my way up all the way to Mount Everest. And it's not, just to go up there and have a selfie on the summit of a mountain, but I want to be able to do interesting and relevant research along the way, such as looking at how climate change and human pollution is affecting even these extremely high and normally pretty pristine environments, and most importantly, what we can do to stop the damage that humans are causing around the world. I'm also combining that with my existing astrobiology related research, so that's looking at life in extreme environments and to see basically what are the limits of life on Earth and what we can learn from that about looking for life elsewhere, whether similar extreme organisms could exist, for example, in other parts of our solar system and beyond. And then the educational element is extremely important to me. So I'm working with different schools and educational institutions around the world to bring on projects that children around the world can also perform and basically compare their results with what I'm doing. So one of them was looking at how the moisture in the soil changes as I was gradually climbing up Kilimanjaro, and children can basically use the same very simple device in their backyards and their schools and compare the values. We were also looking at light pollution, whether even on Kilimanjaro you get light pollution, which you do, unfortunately, even though you're basically in the middle of nowhere and on a very tall mountain. And again, we could compare those levels with levels of light pollution found elsewhere in the world. So it's really just a way for young people to be directly engaged in research and have that opportunity. And in terms of outreach, I love to talk about this project. I've been sharing it on social media. We also filmed a short documentary that we will be sharing in the near future publicly as well. And again, just really to raise awareness about our planet, climate, how it's changing, and most importantly, again, what we can do to help change things for the better. And now I started preparing for the next mountain, which will be in about a year's time, Aconcagua in Argentina.
Wow, I'm simply in awe with everything that you've mentioned about this project. I mean, congratulations on climbing the first mountain. I think what you're doing is inspiring in so many different levels. And I'm not just saying that to say it, because I'm also deeply fascinated with astrobiology and really just extreme environments. Particularly, I'm a space medicine fan. That's kind of the passion and pursuit I want to go into. But the way you're approaching the situation to not only conduct this research, but to take part in providing this opportunity to take along thousands of students with you, essentially, I think is so powerful, because they're able to be like, wow, I could do that when I grow up, but I'm already doing it to a smaller scale along with her, and in my classrooms. And I think that is so powerful in itself. And IgnitedThinkers, as one of our initiatives, we also work with younger students, and we do hands-on activities with them to make them feel like rocket scientists and help them feel confident with research. And I'm so glad that you're doing something very similar and inspiring so many young students to gain, dip their feet into research at a young age, which I think is amazing. So congratulations.
And, and you're right. It's so important. And I'm glad that you're doing it too. And, after this conversation, please let me know if maybe there's a way we could work together.
Yeah, so many ideas were in my mind as you were speaking, because we have so much in common. And that leads me to my next question. You are an astrobiologist, a speaker, as I mentioned, an analog astronaut, and author, a writer, which are so many disciplines really just packed into one. And so I'm curious, you must have had some incredible experiences, incredible memories. And if you had to choose one, which I know is very difficult, what would be your most favorite memory? And can you share it with us?
From all of those experiences. Oh, wow. It's a difficult one.
Maybe a moment that, I'm sorry, go ahead if you had an answer.
No, please.
Oh, I was going to say, like, a moment that you maybe felt really accomplished, or maybe a childhood dream that you had felt fulfilled, just a moment that you were like, this is what I wanted to do, sort of thing.
So maybe if I may I'll share two moments, but they're kind of connected. So it's been my childhood dream since I was about 8 years old to become an astronaut. And it's a journey that I've been on since then, and I have many obstacles along the way. Maybe we'll talk about those later. And so when I was accepted for my first simulated Martian mission, and I first got to put on a simulated spacesuit walk outside into this beautiful, really Martian looking environment and to be doing my astrobiology research there, that at that moment in time really felt like a dream come true. Like I was really doing what I always wanted to do, though in reality, I would ideally like to be on Mars doing astrobiology research, but maybe that may happen one day, we'll see. But then this was 8 years ago, or almost more than that. When this happened, it really felt like everything I had worked on up to that point was worth it. And this is where I'll bridge to the other memory or moment. Sometimes I feel like many of us who have big dreams, we really focus on that. And for example, for me going on these simulated missions, it was really like an important thing that I've been working on. But then I had kind of like an aha moment in the sense that I realized that there's so much more to life and to what we do than just achieving our own personal goals. And so later, as I started to do much more outreach, where I was connecting more young people with what I do, but also audiences literally of all ages, where I have little children that are only several years old, all the way to people who are 80 plus, who are interested in hearing what I have to say. In recent years, I had the kind of realization that actually this is really what my life is about. And this is really what's worth everything I've been doing. Like I used to think it was that moment of partially fulfilling my childhood dream, but actually being able to give back to the community and potentially inspire young people or share with them or the audiences what I've learned was so much more powerful and worthwhile than any of my, say, more personal ambitions.
Wow. Yeah. And you were mentioning that you wanted to become an astronaut, as I think many kids and students do. And it's so hard to stick with that goal, at least personally, I've seen and felt that everybody wants to explore and see what's beyond, but slowly as they grow older, it just seems like a very unrealistic or unreasonable or childhood dream. It doesn't seem like something you could actually be. And so the fact that you've kind of stuck with that goal and, really you're working towards it with the analog missions, becoming director of high seas, I think those are some incredible like moments, I think, to get really closer to your goals. And I'm curious, what was that journey like? And you were mentioning a few obstacles. How did you navigate that dream of yours and make it more of a reality rather than a childhood dream that many students face?
So yeah, you're absolutely right that, because it feels like almost an impossible dream, I think a lot of people either give up because they think it's impossible, or maybe better things come along the way and they realize that they're better suited to do other jobs or focus on other activities. For me, it's always been there ever since I was 8 years old. And then actually a few years after that, I had the privilege of meeting our first and so far only Slovak astronaut, Ivan Bela, when I was still a little girl. And also I actually met the last man to walk on the moon so far, Gene Cerna at the time. He also has Czech and Slovak roots. And I think something that kind of helped fuel me more was the fact that I found their jobs fascinating. And I knew that, I could combine my astrobiology passion with being an astronaut, if all goes well, and actually do research in space looking for aliens, to put it simply. But one thought that struck me when I met those gentlemen was that, where are all the women? Why aren't there more female astronauts or more diverse astronauts? And I think that was another thing that kind of fueled me, or fueled my passion at the time, was I kind of wanted to prove to everyone that, we women, we can do it too. And, we're worthy to be astronauts. And so I think that was another thing, that it was, on one hand, just a passion for the science, to want to do research in space, but there was a bit of, an element of wanting to prove that actually women can do this too. And that kind of started it all. And then in terms of the obstacles, the main ones were finances. Actually, I'll mention two: finances and my nationality. Maybe I'll start with the nationality. As a Slovakian, I currently do not have any possibility to fly to space. Through a space agency anyway. To be part of NASA, you would have to be a US citizen. And until recently, Slovakia was not associated with the European Space Agency to a level where we could actually apply to be part of the astronaut program. Only actually a few weeks ago did we become an associate member state of ESA. That means that during the next astronaut call, we could apply, but that may not happen for another 10 years because we just missed it. It happened last year. So it was very unfortunate timing. So basically my whole life, my only options were to find some other way or to change nationality. And as someone who's always been wanting to lift up people of my country and give them hope that even we can do space things, even though we're not of the right nationality, quote unquote, I never really wanted to give up on my citizenship. And until recently, I actually couldn't have two citizenships. I could only have Slovakian or another one. And that luckily changed. So hopefully I could adopt another citizenship without having to give up on mine. But basically, since I was a little girl, that was a big challenge. And I knew that it's going to be a very long way that I'm going to have to go before I could even, apply to become an astronaut. And then the finances, that was a big issue because my parents simply could not afford to finance my studies. And I knew I had to study in the UK or the US to get somewhere close to space, because in Slovakia, there weren't really many options, or in other places in Europe. And so already at the age of 15, I started having multiple part-time jobs. I would work throughout the high school years and every summer to start saving up money. But even then, it's not enough really to pay for university fees. So luckily I got various scholarships into my universities in London, University College London. Then I got a scholarship worth $50,000 to go to CalTech, where I really got into more of the biology side, because in London I studied geology and astrophysics, because you couldn't really study astrobiology at the time. I got biology in there later. And then basically I found out there was someone at NASA JPL doing the kind of astrobiology research I was really passionate about, this life in extreme environments. But as a Slovak and basically as an international student, I couldn't work for NASA. It was just, it's a visa rule. But because I was so passionate about this project, I had so many ideas, the researcher thought, oh, wow, I'm really enthusiastic. Maybe we can find another way. So we were able to apply for a special grant, and I was able to work for NASA as a visiting researcher. And so at the age of 21, I got so much closer to my childhood dream than I could have ever imagined. And that basically just really helped me feel like, okay, I'm on the right path. I'm doing the right things. It has been difficult. There were actually even times when I was working for NASA that I actually didn't have any money, because I spent most of my money on the tuition fees and just trying to survive in LA, which was pretty expensive at the time. So I was actually homeless while working for NASA. I would just go sleep on random strangers' couches and move from place to place almost every night sometimes, just because I just couldn't afford to pay rent. And it took a while for my salary from NASA to come through. But again, every day, though it was difficult, I told myself, but I made it this far, I can't just let go. And so those are the kind of obstacles I went through, let's say, my student years, where I just never had money, always had to have multiple part-time jobs while studying, always trying to get the best grades to get scholarships. And it was just this endless nightmare until I got accepted for a grant to finance my PhD studies. And then finally, I actually was in a better place financially. But then it's all about getting research grants to actually finance the research you want to do. So more money problems. And then I'll just mention maybe a couple of other types of obstacles that came during that time and later. And part of them, some of them are related to the fact, or I can only assume based on my experience of just being a woman in this sector. Many times I was the only woman or one of few, and was definitely treated differently to my male peers. Discrimination of all sorts, harassment of different types. And so I had to go through some difficult times there. Even back home in Slovakia, I went back home after my PhD because I felt like, okay, if there's a time to try and make some changes in my home country, it was then. And so I did. I tried very hard to move the space sector forward. And it's in part thanks to my work with this organization called SOSA, the Slovak Organization for Space Activities. We launched the first Slovak satellite. We started up a bunch of space projects that led to the first space startups in Slovakia. I even started teaching astrobiology as a professor and started up a space engineering degree program in Slovakia for the first time. So we were doing a lot of great things, but I can only, try and assume what was going on in the minds of certain people, but certain older male professors, I guess, didn't like all these changes I was making in the country. They didn't like how much the media liked all the outreach I was doing. And they started spreading lies in the media that I never worked for NASA and that our satellite is nonsense and all these things, to the point where two of my colleagues actually collapsed and had to go to the hospital because all the lies that were spread were just so bad. And so those were, again, very challenging times, but I guess I had to remind myself of those positive things of, I tried so hard, got this far, can't give up because there's some mean people out there who are spreading lies. And also, most importantly, at that time, I started receiving a lot of school projects from children of different ages, boys and girls, telling me how I'm inspiring them to pursue their dreams, how they want to do space things. And I just realized that despite all the negative stuff, it's all worth it to do the outreach, to try and change things in my home country, despite a certain resistance. And that just kept motivating me to go forward. So yes, there have been a lot of obstacles along the way, but luckily, I never felt that there's something that should stop me in what I'm doing, especially when I feel like there's much more purpose to what I'm doing than, again, just doing something selfish for myself.
Wow, I've talked with so many individuals from so many backgrounds, and I think your journey so far has been one of the most inspiring that I've ever listened to.
Thank you.
There were so many incredible points that you mentioned. I mean, just starting from the beginning of your purpose of what drove you into the space industry, you were saying that you saw a lot of male astronauts and not a lot of female astronauts, or not a lot of astronauts from your country. And instead of taking it as, oh, I can't be what I don't see, you instead said, I'm going to be what I want so I can show other people that they can also be what, if they want to be an astronaut, they can be an astronaut. And I think that mindset is in itself is just so powerful. And a lot of times as younger students, we can feel like the imposter syndrome, or feel, oh, we're not good enough to do something, we should change our career paths. But you were like, no, I'm going to change the norm, I'm going to change it for other students who are in my country. And I think that in itself is just so powerful to have in your mindset. And listening to what you went through your educational experiences to get to where you are today, just I think it just speaks to your character, and also how passionate you are about space. I don't think anyone can say they've been through like all of that and they're still moving, they're still going just as fast forward. I think a lot of times I hear so many stories and they just stop in the middle because they think it's just too difficult. And even if you had the option to potentially work at NASA or to potentially kind of stay here, you went back, you took the hard way to go do what really mattered to you. And I think that's amazing. So, congratulations on everything that you've already accomplished. And I'm just really looking forward to see all that change that you will continue to bring, really in so many developing nations. I think they can really look up to the work you're doing.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your kind words.
Yeah, and as a part of that journey, I think a big part of it must have been high seas and becoming an analog astronaut and being able to use your position, or to be able to use your platform to inspire so many students and young professionals. So for those who may not know, could you talk more about what high seas is, and potentially ways young professionals who are interested in going and pursuing the astronaut path could get involved?
Yeah, definitely. So HISES is a research facility in Hawaii, where until recently, so I'm not the director anymore, or not full time. I'm still helping out, but for about 4 years and something, I was in Hawaii running this facility where we organized simulated missions to the moon and Mars. So these are missions during which we're simulating what the first colonies are probably going to be, or the first settlements on the moon and Mars, what kind of work the astronauts are going to need to do, what food they're going to eat, how they're going to survive with limited resources, and most importantly, what are the typical problems that are likely to arise from a psychological point of view, and how to best address those problems, which also relates to who are the best people to send on such missions in the first place. And so this research is really extensive. I've been working with different space agencies, including NASA, ESA, and others around the world, but also different companies and organizations. And my goal as a director was really to open up this facility to as many people from around the world as I could. Before my time it was much more restricted to basically just a collaboration with NASA, and there had their rules and protocols on the kind of people they would select for missions, which is understandable, but it felt like it really limited the kinds of people we were selecting for these analog astronaut missions. And so it's been my goal to really change that, to diversify the crew. And kind of like what you were saying earlier is many people, if they don't see themselves in these roles, they think that those roles are not for them, that it's just impossible for someone of a certain gender or ethnicity and so on to be able to apply to such a role. And so I'm very happy to say that during my time, I had a huge increase in women applying for these missions as analog astronauts. Actually, the majority of applicants and even crew members that I eventually selected based on their credentials were women. And I had a huge increase of people of color, people of the LGBTQ plus community that applied and have been part of missions. And it really changed, but part of it was really to encourage the first people who are, say, of minorities to be part of these missions. And then others of those minorities would kind of see themselves and realize, oh, I have a chance, maybe it's worth applying. And that was, I would say, the most rewarding thing for me, to really see these diverse crews, how they work extremely well together. And diversity is also important, not just in terms of ethnicity and so on, but also of in terms of our skill set. So,
a big one.
Typically for a lot of these analog missions, space agencies and space organizations would choose engineers, scientists, kind of, stereotypically what they imagine an astronaut to be like. But, we've been finding more and more in the space industry, but in other sectors as well, that actually having a diverse crew of people that are artists, journalists, teachers, basically people who are trained differently, who also bring in a different mindset and, most importantly, perspective, they can completely change the way a mission is run. And that means, for example, if there's a problem, if we're all trained to think the same way, we're all going to try and address the problem the same way. But someone with a different perspective and experience, they can come up with very different and interesting ways of solving the problem or dealing with a certain situation. And so that kind of diversity also completely changed the way missions were run and the results of all those missions. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and especially for me, another great way to be able to give back to the community and use this quote unquote power that I had as director to open up a facility which used to be very limited in the past.
Definitely. And what you were mentioning about the diversity and not only just the ethnicity or the background, nationality, but also skill sets, I think is so important. A lot of times you were mentioning even when I talk with younger students, I also do a lot of outreach with elementary school students. And when I ask them, what do you think when you think of space in terms of careers? And usually they're engineers or aerospace engineers or astronauts. But I don't really hear any of the other niche, also very important careers that exist today, including space policy, space medicine, space art, space journalism. There's just, space finance. There's so much that happens in space. And I think a lot of times we tend to limit it to just engineers, which of course I think play one of the largest roles in the industry. But there are still other unique skill sets we need to acknowledge and fill in the roles as we continue to expand the aerospace sector. And as a younger student myself, I always, whenever I am given the opportunity to speak, I always mention diversity in age as well. I think a lot of times we forget that younger students do have important thoughts to share. And honestly, I think the younger ones are the ones who will be leading the future of the industry and need to be involved in these types of conversations starting now. So whether it be attending conferences for free, being able to connect and network with professionals, or have these types of analog mission opportunities, of course, they have to be qualified to a certain extent, but there shouldn't necessarily have to be an age limit. I don't think it should be like 25 plus. I think we could go younger to some extent, like 18 plus, to encourage more young students to get involved. So, I think I always try to mention the factor of age as well, which is usually forgotten quite frequently.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I'll mention that I noticed that very quickly on when I started running missions at high seas, that age was very important in the sense that we shouldn't discriminate people because of that. So I started pushing the age limit. I think the youngest person I had was 19. But again, because we needed to have the right qualification. And in terms of the upper age limit, I didn't actually put a number there. I just needed to make sure they were physically fit, because you're, after all, on a volcano at 2,500 meters in elevation. So there's a lot of different stress factors related to that, and wearing the spacesuits and all these things. And I always try to combine the crews where there would be at least one younger, less experienced person, but who could, like you said, bring ideas and other perspectives, and at least one more experienced / older person who, again, would have that wealth of knowledge and wisdom. And that combination worked actually extremely well.
Exactly. I'm so excited to hear that, knowing that I'm 19 and I'm interested in analog missions, because that'll definitely, it's just hopeful that there are opportunities out there for younger students to get involved, and you don't have to feel like you're being put in a box because of your age, which I think is incredible. And my next question is regarding your book, which I'm really excited to learn more about. So in your introduction, I was mentioning how you co-authored your biography, A Woman from Mars. And I was really intrigued by this title, and more so, what was the inspiration behind it? So could you share more about this biography and really the purpose and the inspiration behind it?
Mm-hmm. So maybe I'll start with the name, A Woman from Mars. It's a little inside joke, because when I started doing a lot of outreach in Slovakia, I would be talking a lot about Mars and the simulated space missions, but also the research I would want to do on Mars, astrobiology. And for some reason, I guess because of that, people just started associating me with Mars. And when people would recognize me on the street and on trains, even in the park or forest, where I'd be doing mountain biking, I would just randomly meet people and like, oh, aren't you the lady from Mars? And it was always the lady from Mars. And so we kind of, when we put the book together, we decided to go with, that's kind of how people know me, but we'll change it to A Woman from Mars, which also is a little bit of a play on the saying that women are from Venus, men are from Mars. So maybe to throw a wrench into that system and be like, well, actually, women can be from Mars too. So that's kind of where the name came from, but it is mostly my biography. And the purpose of me kind of sharing this story is to talk about things like the obstacles we talked about earlier, and my motivation, and mostly to inspire others to follow their dreams, and to show, yes, there are always going to be some kinds of obstacles along the way, but you shouldn't, if you really want something, just give up because of that. And of course, there's also, some people say, go after your dreams no matter what. But I think many times people forget to mention integrity and being ethical. So I wouldn't say go after your dreams no matter what, because that could also mean you could do it at the cost of other people and actually hurt other people along the way. So it's really important to stay true to yourself and try and stick to ethical and good principles, no matter what you do. And, and I'm still saying this as a joke, so hope it won't be taken the wrong way, but I've been told for a long time, well, why don't I just marry someone of a certain nationality, and then I would get my other citizenship, and then I could apply for space agency astronaut positions or whatever. And so had I not had that kind of integrity, yes, I could have married someone a very long time ago and had citizenship and given up on Slovakia and done things very differently. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have to take a route that I thought was wrong in order to get closer to my dream. So instead, I'm taking the hard way. We're finding a very long way of hopefully one day becoming an astronaut. But I'm sticking to my principles. And so even if it doesn't work out later in life, I'll at least know that I tried my best, and I didn't do anything wrong or against my ethics and so on. And so it's these kinds of messages that I'm trying to share in my story, in the book, of, yes, I went through all these things. Yes, it was difficult, but it was worth it because of all these great things, like being able to motivate young people, open doors to people from Slovakia, but also elsewhere in the world, to be part of analog missions or get into the space sector or study astrobiology or whatever it is. And, and to see that really where there's a will, there's a way. But again, it's important to do it also the right way, or correct way, if you will.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get my hands on that book now that I was able to actually really learn about your journey or a glimpse or a slice of your journey. I am personally very intrigued to learn kind of what that journey looked like for you and some of the thoughts and reflections you have. I think writing a biography is almost like a mini journal. You're able to talk about your experiences, but also take them in a positive direction to help other young students and really adults to navigate their own lives. I think it could be such a great way for everyone, including myself, to just learn more and to be able to gain a different perspective on some of the challenges we're facing. Sometimes we think we're facing the largest difficulties ever until you learn about someone else or you learn about how they dealt with their problems and you're like, wait, I was doing this wrong the whole time. So I'm definitely very excited to read A Woman from Mars and really just kind of get deeper into your story. So very exciting.
Thank you very much. I'll just share that for now it's only in Slovakian, but I'm working on finding an American publisher to rewrite it because I don't want to just translate it. I actually want to rewrite it and share some more information since then because I wrote it over 2 years ago now. So unfortunately, it's going to take some time, but I definitely want it to come out in English, hopefully in the next couple of years or so.
Perfect. I can't wait. I will keep a lookout for it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And now that we were able to learn a little bit more about your journey, I want to ask you a question regarding the space industry and kind of the future of it. So, from your experience and background, from your personal opinion, what makes you nervous and what makes you excited for the future of the space industry?
I think the one thing that makes me feel both is the role of the industrial part of the space sector. So basically companies, commercial companies taking, rocket building and space tourism and things like that into their hands. On one hand, I think it's great that, for example, various space agencies like NASA are outsourcing so many things to companies so they don't have to invest money, time, and all that into making rockets and so on. However, the negative side of that is that currently a lot of these opportunities lie in the hands of wealthy people who, unfortunately, in many cases have big egos and they think that they can do whatever they want. And again, that goes back to the ethics I was mentioning earlier, where a lot of people or these particular people think that, because they have power and money, they can get away with whatever they want. They don't respect international treaties. Their vision of going to other planets and moons may not be the best one for humanity. It might be just, again, another ego thing to prove that they can do it, but not to do it, a decent way. And so that is a big concern to me is, while I want the space sector to really advance, I really hope for humans to be able to go back to the moon and Mars. I really don't want it to become another era of colonization like it was not too long ago, where people were treated badly and it has had terrible consequences to this day. And we really should not be applying similar morals into our future, looking at space settlements rather than colonies. So it is something I'm concerned about, and I hope that more strict rules and regulations are going to be put in place and that these companies are going to respect them and that we'll still be able to do research on Mars before we just start sending people there and improvising really how people are going to survive there, because that's the feeling I'm getting from some companies. So it's still a big question mark, and there's still hope for it to be done in a decent way, but there is a risk that it won't be if people won't and their companies won't be kept in check.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's like incredibly important insight as well. I think commercialization in space is like a double-edged sword. It can be like very positive, but it can also have some negative effects as well that at least we need to be cautious of and at least have in our minds that, hey, this is happening. How do we address it? So I think definitely kind of having both perspectives of it is critical. And now that we were able to learn a little bit more about your journey, the work you've been a part of and are currently doing with Seven Summits, as well as your perspective on the future of the space industry, my last and final question for you is what final piece of advice, you've given plenty of incredible advice throughout the interview, but what is one final piece of advice you have for young students or professionals regarding their pursuit of a passion in STEM, aerospace, really just any field, something you wish you knew when you you were a younger student? If you could like time travel and tell yourself something, what would that one piece of advice be?
It's a difficult one because, many times you wonder if you made the right decisions along the way. And I sometimes do wonder, if I could have told myself something, would I have changed something in my life? But on the other hand, I've also found that, everything that's happened, the good and the bad in my life, led me to be who I am today. And for that reason, I wouldn't want to really change anything. But I think one thing that I have definitely sacrificed a lot over the years was myself, my hobbies, my interests, my time with loved ones. And though, again, I don't regret it because it helped me get to where I am today, I'm sure it will have long-term negative effects. For example, I've been severely sleep deprived for a long time. I'm trying to catch up now, but I feel like it's something, but my body's not going to forgive that easily. So I think if there's any other advice I would like to share, apart some of the things I mentioned earlier, is really just don't forget about yourself along the way. Like it's great to pursue a passion and get past those obstacles. Don't let people dissuade you, but of course, please do it ethically and so on. But again, don't forget about your own health and happiness. And as many astronauts say, it's not just about reaching the goal, because, for example, in my case, I really want to become an astronaut. But if I would live my whole life just for that one moment to hopefully be selected as an astronaut and go to space, then I would just lose that entire part of my life. And what if it doesn't even work out? What if I would only think about that one thing my entire life, it doesn't work out? I'd feel like I wasted my whole life. So instead, enjoy the journey along the way. Do things that you enjoy while pursuing your goal. And so even if it doesn't work out, you at least, you would have enjoyed your life along the way, still did things that are fulfilling to you. Break up your milestone into sub-milestones, sub-parts. For example, like 7 Summits is a more minor project compared to becoming an astronaut. So at least, again, if I don't become an astronaut, at least I'll hopefully climb Everest, So it's things like that where just when you think ahead, while you may have those big goals, give yourself smaller ones along the way, and don't forget about yourself and what you as a person need as well along the way.
Yes, I will definitely take that to heart and make sure I remember that advice, as well as I'm sure every single person who's listening will attempt to. I know it's very hard to listen to advice and to be able to kind of implement it into your own life, but I think this is something that just having in your conscious mind is always important. Just remembering that, if you have a large goal, there are steps to get there, and acknowledging each small success you have to get there is also part of the journey. And making sure you're taking care of yourself along that journey is just as important as you're reaching those goals. So really, thank you so much for taking your time today. I had an absolute pleasure really just speaking to you. I think a lot of times people can read your bio, your introduction, and all the accomplishments you've already made through your social media, and it's so hard to imagine that it's ever impossible to accomplish what you have done already. And I think listening to your journey really just helped me, and I'm sure others who are listening, kind of humanize all your accomplishments and the work that you did to get to where you are today. So thank you so much for all your time today. I had a wonderful time speaking with you.
Thank you so much as well. I had a great time too. You've been great to talk to, and really appreciate all your kind words. And I hope that we'll work together on some of my projects soon.
Yes, thank you.